Stop scrolling right now because what you are about to read is not just another celebrity rumor or fan theory floating across the internet. This is the moment a private letter changed everything between two of the most talked about names in Chinese entertainment. And if you stay until the end, you will understand why fans across the world are completely divided about what this message truly means and why it has reopened a story many thought was already over. It started without warning, no announcement, no interview, no public appearance. Just a single image that appeared online and spread so quickly that within minutes it had already reached millions of viewers who could not believe what they were seeing. A handwritten letter allegedly from Bai Lu addressed to Joseph Zeng, and those few words inside it were enough to shake the entire fandom. At first people thought it was fake, another edited post designed to stir attention. But then details began to emerge that made it harder to dismiss. The handwriting matched known samples from behind-the-scenes notes. The tone felt deeply personal, and the timing aligned with recent quiet speculation about the two stars having crossed paths again after a long period of distance. The letter itself was not long, but its emotional weight was impossible to ignore. What we had was real. That one line became the center of everything. Not a denial, not a joke, not a vague memory, but a direct statement that carried the force of something unfinished. Fans immediately began dissecting every possible meaning, revisiting old interviews, rewatching behind-the-scenes clips, and searching for moments that might now look different in hindsight, because suddenly every shared scene between Bai Lu and Joseph Zeng was being viewed through a completely new emotional lens. The more people looked, the more they remembered how naturally they interacted during filming periods, how certain moments of silence between them felt unusually comfortable, and how even in group settings their attention sometimes seemed to shift toward each other without effort. But what made this situation even more intense was the silence that followed. Neither Bai Lu nor Joseph Zeng responded immediately, and that silence created a space where imagination grew faster than facts, where every fan theory became louder than official statements, and where every unanswered question began to feel like part of a hidden story waiting to be confirmed. Behind-the-scenes reports began to surface, suggesting that Bai Lu had been unusually reflective during recent work schedules, often seen in quiet moments between takes, holding onto her phone longer than usual, as if reconsidering something she had already decided to express. At the same time, Joseph Zeng remained absent from public discussion, avoiding direct commentary and continuing his work with minimal engagement in trending topics, which only made the curiosity around him grow even stronger. Then something unexpected happened. A second detail emerged from within industry circles, suggesting that the two had recently crossed paths briefly at a private industry gathering, not publicly photographed together, but reportedly seen exchanging a quiet conversation that lasted longer than expected. According to those present, the interaction did not appear tense or distant, but rather calm and familiar, as if time had not erased the connection between them completely. That single detail reignited the entire discussion, because now the letter no longer felt like an isolated emotional moment. It felt like a continuation of something that had never fully disappeared. As speculation grew, fans began dividing into different interpretations, some believing the letter was a nostalgic reflection of a past working relationship that left a lasting emotional impression, others convinced it hinted at something deeper that had never been openly acknowledged, and a smaller group insisting that the truth lay somewhere in between those two extremes. Days passed, and the tension only increased until finally Bai Lu appeared in a public setting for a scheduled event, maintaining her usual composed presence, but with a noticeable softness in her expression that fans immediately picked up on. She did not address the letter directly. She did not confirm or deny anything. But she also did not dismiss the conversation entirely, choosing instead to remain silent while continuing her professional commitments, a decision that only intensified public interpretation rather than resolving it. Shortly after, Joseph Zeng also reappeared in a separate context, and like Bai Lu, he offered no direct response, but those observing closely noted a subtle difference in his demeanor, a quieter tone in his interactions, and a more reflective presence than usual. And that was enough for the story to evolve again. Because in the absence of confirmation, even the smallest gesture becomes part of the narrative. As time continued, the intensity of the situation slowly began to settle, But the letter remained a persistent topic of discussion, shared repeatedly across platforms, analyzed endlessly, and interpreted in ways that kept the story alive long after its first appearance. Then came the final shift. A close industry account suggested that the letter may not have been about rekindling anything in the present, but rather about acknowledging something meaningful that existed in the past, something that was never formally defined but still emotionally significant to both individuals involved. Not a public relationship, not a confirmed romance, but a connection that once existed in a space between friendship and something deeper, shaped by timing, work, and shared experience. This perspective changed everything again because it reframed the letter not as a confession of current feelings, but as a recognition of something that once mattered and still left an impact even after distance had grown. In the end, neither Bai Lu nor Joseph Zeng ever gave a dramatic public explanation. No confirmation. No denial. No confrontation. Just silence that allowed interpretation to remain open. And that silence became the final chapter of the story. Because sometimes what captures the world's attention is not what is said clearly, but what is felt quietly through a single sentence that refuses to disappear. And in this case, that sentence was enough to turn a simple letter into a global conversation. A reminder that emotions do not always end when people part ways. Sometimes they remain in memory, waiting to be noticed again when the right moment brings them back into the light. After the letter spread across the internet, and the phrase, "What we had was real," became the most discussed line in the entire fandom, the story did not slow down. Instead, it shifted into a quieter but heavier phase, where silence itself began to feel like an answer that no one fully understood. For several days, there was no direct response from either Bai Lu or Joseph Zeng. No interviews, no clarification, no denial, just distance. But behind that silence, something was clearly changing. Bai Lu was seen returning to her professional schedule, but those who observed her closely noticed a difference. She remained composed, as always, but there was a quiet reflection in her presence, like someone who had already said what they needed to say privately and was now choosing not to expand on it publicly. She did not avoid work. She did not withdraw. But she also did not engage with the ongoing speculation, as if she had made a clear internal decision not to let the public interpretation reshape her reality. Meanwhile, Joseph Zeng remained completely absent from any public conversation about the letter. His silence was even more noticeable because it felt intentional, not reactive. No posts. No interviews addressing the situation. Just continuation of his professional commitments, as though he was observing the entire storm from a distance. And that distance created even more tension in the story. Because now fans were no longer just reacting to a leaked message. They were reacting to the absence of confirmation from both sides, which allowed imagination to fill every gap left open. Then, something unexpected happened. A brief, indirect moment between them surfaced from behind the scenes of a past project. Not new footage, but an old clip that suddenly gained attention again. In it, Bai Lu and Joseph Zeng were seen laughing naturally between takes, speaking casually when they thought cameras were not focused on them. At the time, it meant nothing unusual. But after the letter, every small gesture now carried new interpretation. Fans began to analyze tone, timing, expressions, and pauses. The same footage that once looked like simple friendship now felt different under the weight of recent events. But what changed the direction of the story again was not another clip. It was a message that neither confirmed nor denied anything. A short statement from Joseph Zeng's side eventually circulated, not directly addressing the letter, but acknowledging the importance of respecting private memories and avoiding excessive interpretation of personal history. It was carefully worded, neutral, controlled. But for fans, it was enough to shift the narrative again. Because it did not erase the letter. It did not explain it. It simply framed it as something that belonged to the past, without defining what that past actually was. Bai Lu, on her side, continued to remain silent publicly. However, during a brief appearance at a promotional event, those watching closely noticed something subtle. When asked unrelated questions, she smiled calmly, but there was a softness in her expression that felt reflective rather than reactive, as if she had already made peace with the attention surrounding the situation. There was no mention of Joseph Zeng, no mention of the letter. But the atmosphere around her felt different enough for fans to notice. As time passed, the intensity of the situation slowly began to settle. The internet moved from shock to analysis, from analysis to interpretation, and eventually into ongoing discussion rather than constant reaction. And through all of it, one thing remained unchanged: the letter itself. Because it was never fully explained. It was never publicly confirmed as romantic or symbolic or purely nostalgic. It existed in a space of interpretation, where meaning depended entirely on perspective. Some fans believed it was a reflection of a past emotional connection that was never fully defined but still meaningful enough to acknowledge. Others believed it was simply a heartfelt message between two people who once shared a close working bond that left a lasting impression. And some believed the truth was somewhere in between, something real in feeling but never fully transformed into a publicly defined relationship. But the final resolution did not come from social media. It came from distance. Over time, both Bai Lu and Joseph Zeng returned fully to their separate professional paths. Their careers continued, their projects moved forward, and the noise gradually faded into background conversation. No reunion statement was ever made. No dramatic clarification was ever issued. And no attempt was made to rewrite the narrative. Instead, the story ended in silence. Not the kind of silence that hides something, but the kind that closes something gently, without forcing it into words. And in that quiet ending, the meaning of the letter changed again. It was no longer just a viral moment. It became a memory interpreted differently by everyone who saw it. A reminder that some emotions are not meant to be fully explained to the world, only understood in fragments. And sometimes, the most powerful stories are not the ones that are confirmed, but the ones that are simply felt, then left to exist on their own.